Good morning and welcome to the Community Church of Chapel Hill Unitarian Universalist. I am Nathan Kosiba, a member of the Worship Associates Ministry here at the church. I want to welcome each of you to our virtual Sunday service. Whoever you are, whomever you love, however you came to worship with us today, you are welcome here. With the approaching end of the calendar year, the church's treasurer Andrew Wright and assistant treasurer Bill Poteet are offering a timely Q&A opportunity after today's coffee hour. Did you know there will be a key date in mid-spring 2021 by which time donations to the Capital Fund could significantly cut future interest costs and thus further help close the building project gap? There could also be tax advantages for those planning to make such a donation to do so before the end of calendar 2020. You are invited to bring your questions or general interest to this session for an informal explanation and discussion of end-of-year donation strategies. To attend, click on the coffee hour Zoom link anytime after 11 a.m. and stay connected when the coffee hour concludes about 11:45 a.m. The Q&A session will last about 30 minutes or as long as there are questions. If you are interested but unable to attend the session, or instead would like to speak privately on the topic, either Andrew or Bill would be happy to talk with you informally at a mutually convenient time. Their contact information is in the church directory. What are the colors of this season? They're red and green, bright red for ribbons and green for wreaths and evergreen trees. What are the colors of this season? They're silver and gold. The jingle of silver bells, the twinkling of lights, the bright star in the sky. What are the colors of this season? They're purple and pink. The Advent colors reminding us of hope, faith, love, and peace. What are the colors of this season? There is another color, blue, the blue of blue holidays, the blue of grief and loss, the blue of loneliness and isolation, the blue of sadness and disappointment, especially this year. Let Christmas come, we say. O come, Emmanuel. But we know it comes to those in exile and those with aching hearts. We know it comes amidst greed and war and to those with broken souls. Bring all the colors of this season. Bring the festive cheeriness of bright red and evergreen. Bring the twinkling silver lights and the warm golden glow of candlelight. Bring the faithful colors of purple and pink, but bring the blue too. The fullness of your whole self, of all you hold. Bring them. Come, let us worship together.
During the month of December, we light not only our chalice, the symbol of Unitarian Universalism, but we also light candles on the Advent wreath. Last Sunday, we lit the first candle on the Advent wreath for hope, and this week we light the second candle for peace. Please read along the words for lighting our chalice. This morning they are from Pema Chodron. If we want there to be peace in the world, we have to be brave enough to soften what is rigid in our hearts, to find the soft spot and stay with it. We have to have that kind of courage and take that kind of responsibility. That is the true practice of peace. We light our Advent candles with these words from Reverend Erica Hewitt. May this time of waiting inspire our courage. May we find that soft spot in the pressures of this season and stay with it as we discern our way forward. May we be filled with loving kindness. May we be at ease and discover the true practice of peace within us so that there might be peace in our world.
The reading this morning comes from an article entitled Acedia, the lost name for the emotion we're all feeling right now, by Jonathan Zecher. The news seems worse every day, yet we compulsively scroll through it. We get distracted by social media, yet have a pile of books unread. We keep meaning to go outside, but somehow never find the time. We're bored, listless, afraid, and uncertain. What is this feeling? John Cassian, a monk and theologian, wrote in the early 5th century about an ancient Greek emotion called acedia. A mind seized by this emotion is horrified at where he is, disgusted with his room. It does not allow him to stay in his cell or to devote any effort to reading. He feels such bodily listlessness and yawning hunger as though he were worn by a long journey or a prolonged fast. Next, he glances about and sighs that no one is coming to see him. Constantly in and out of his cell, he looks at the sun as if it were too slow in setting. This sounds eerily familiar. Cassian and other early Christians called acedia the noonday demon, and sometimes describe it as a train of thought, but they did not think it affected city dwellers or even monks and communities. Rather, acedia arose directly out of the spatial and social constrictions that a solitary monastic life necessitates. These conditions generate a strange combination of listlessness, undirected anxiety, and inability to concentrate. Together, these make up the paradoxical emotion of acedia. Reviving the language of acedia is important to our experience in two ways. First, it distinguishes the complex of emotions brought on by enforced isolation, constant uncertainty, and the barrage of bad news from clinical terms like depression or anxiety. Second, and more importantly, the feelings associated with physical isolation are exasperated by emotional isolation. That terrible sense that this thing I feel is mine alone. When an experience can be named, it can be communicated and even shared.
The Devil of the Noonday Sun, a sermon for December 6th, 2020. Early in my ministry, When I was serving my first church, I used to preach a sermon about a difficult emotion on the first Sunday of December each year. One year I preached on loneliness, how being away from loved ones was especially challenging at this time of the year. One year I preached about depression. December seemed like a time when a lot of people were really at risk of slipping into that mood of pervasive sadness. One year I preached about jealousy, that tendency to compare our own struggles and shortcomings and inadequacies with our idealized fantasies about how well others must have it. I'm not sure if I had the words for it back then, but these sermonic efforts were my way of acknowledging the quote-unquote blue holidays, that the pain of grief and loss and heartbreak are often felt more acutely, that our struggles and disappointments are often felt more intensely in this season. Since coming here to Community Church, and this is the 7th Christmas season I'm spending with you, I have gotten out of this habit of annual preaching on the blue holidays. And then, some time ago, I stumbled upon an article about a challenging emotion, an emotion I'd never preached on before. And I decided to resuscitate that practice, and here we are. The article, which Nathan read an excerpt from a little earlier, is by Jonathan Zecher, who's a professor of religion at a Catholic university in Australia. The article, with the clickbait title, "The Lost Name for an Emotion We're All Feeling Right Now," is about acedia. How many of you have ever heard of acedia? The title grabbed my attention because acedia was a term I recognized but hadn't thought of for many years. When I was a religion major in college, I had become fascinated by the Desert Fathers, early Christian monks in northern Africa who engaged in grueling spiritual practices. The writings left behind by these desert monks describe the spiritual afflictions they faced, the demons who came to torment them as they went about their spiritual lives. Of those demons, one of the most common was acedia, also known as the noonday demon, or the devil of the noonday sun. This demon appears in the form of melancholy, listlessness, torpor, apathy. But the feeling of being afflicted with acedia isn't relaxing. It is combined, this listlessness is combined with anxiety and worry. And acedia is known as the devil of the noonday sun because time just seems to pass so slowly. And because the feeling of it is relentlessly oppressive, like the sun beating down mercilessly upon the desert. And Jonathan Zecher, in this piece he wrote, made this clever observation. These feelings that we feel right now that are so common to so many of us during a pandemic, these moods generated by lockdowns and cancellations and solitariness, the blur of computer screens, these feelings seem quite similar to that ancient emotion of acedia, described in depth within the ancient literature. I remember an article I read way back in April, in the early days of the lockdown. The article, which I did not like, announced, "We're all monks now. We're all monks now." To which I sneered, "Yeah, but I sure don't remember taking monastic vows." Which is to say, none of us signed up for this, right? If I can be a little vulnerable for a minute, I will tell you that I am tired of the pandemic, especially this past week. This past week in particular has gotten me down as I have found myself grieving over the distances and the difficulties of these times, the impossibilities the pandemic imposes. My heart today is really calling out to my family back in Boston, just as it has called out throughout the pandemic, to children learning online, to grandparents kept apart from grandchildren and grandchildren kept apart from grandparents. My heart calls out to the dead and the sick, the exhausted, the impoverished, the imprisoned. My heart calls out for you, for all of the parts of church that I miss so much. In Jonathan Zecher's piece, linking today's struggles to the ancient Greek emotion of acedia, he identifies two benefits to making this connection. First, being able to name what we're feeling serves to legitimize it. There's actually a name for this. It's important to know the names of our demons. And knowing that it's real, knowing that this feeling is real, helps us to better understand that the way we're feeling is natural. It's not our own fault. And secondly, Zecher says that by naming it, we can understand that we are not alone. When an experience can be named, he writes, it can be communicated and even shared. Learning to express new or previously unrecognized constellations of feelings, sensations, and thoughts builds an emotional repertoire, assists in emotional regulation. Naming and expressing experiences, he writes, allows us to claim some agency in dealing with them. Both of those benefits seem true to me. But I want to go even a little deeper. You see, acedia is not just an emotion that is described in the ancient writings of the desert monks. There is also literature they've left behind on how to oppose, resist, and deal with acedia when it afflicts us. One of the ways to combat acedia, according to the ancient sources, seems paradoxical. What is recommended are tears. Yes, tears. Saint Evagrius of Pontus, famous Christian monk and ascetic who lived in the 4th century, wrote the following, quote, "Sadness is burdensome, and acedia is irresistible. But tears shed before God are stronger than both." So when you are feeling down, melancholy, listless, one of the temptations is to say, "Oh, I'm fine." It's tempting to put on our armor, to put on our mask, to raise our defenses, and to say, "Oh no, I'm okay." One of the traps we can fall into is the trap of comparison. We think, well, I must have it so better. I clearly have it so much better than so many others. So many others have it so much worse than I do. Considering how well I have it, it would be disgraceful to admit that I'm struggling, when so many others are surely struggling so much worse. It is interesting to note that there's also a lot in the monastic literature warning against trying to compare yourself with others. And this train of thought, This train of thought that says, oh no, I'm fine, is actually less helpful when it comes to overcoming the devil of the noonday sun. It's when we admit our vulnerability, our grief, and our sorrow that we are also admitting our heart's greatest longings. And it is through our connection with that longing that we restore a bit of our humanity. Indeed, as Evagrius said, sadness is burdensome and acedia is irresistible, but tears shed before God are stronger than both. As I read a little bit into the writings about acedia, a second strategy for combating it that came up again and again was discipline. But the lesson I want you to take from this is a little bit different. When they say that the key is work and discipline, they weren't saying, just buck up and get back to work. They weren't saying, grin and bear it. No, I believe that if you read a little more deeply, I believe that what they were talking about was the ability to be present in the moment. There's a passage in the sayings of the Desert Fathers that goes like this. Once, when Antony was sitting in the desert, he fell into boredom and irritation, acedia. He said to God, Lord, I want to be made whole, and my thoughts do not let me. What am I to do about this trouble? How shall I be cured? After a while, he got up and went outside. He saw someone like himself sitting down and working, then standing up to pray, then sitting down again to make a plate of palm leaves, and standing up again to pray. It was an angel of the Lord sent to correct Antony and make him vigilant. He heard the voice of the angel saying, do this and you will be cured. When he heard it, he was very glad and recovered his confidence. He did what the angel had done, and in so doing found the salvation he was seeking. So what's the meaning of this passage? I think what this passage is really talking about is having the ability to be present in the here and now. It is to say that that angel who modeled for Antony prayed while he prayed and worked while he worked. While he worked, he did not think I should be praying, and while he prayed, he did not think I should be working. There was presence. I know a couple months ago, I fell into a groove. One of the things that brings me a lot of joy in my life is reading. I read a lot, and I found myself for a period of 2 or 3 weeks, every time I sat down to try to read, I would make it about halfway through the paragraph, and then my mind would wander to all of the other things. And I think that distraction, that inability to be present, that was a manifestation of acedia. So I think another tip, a second tip, is this learning to be present, to say, I am right here. I will do this thing, and while I am doing this, that is what I shall give my mind to. A third antidote to acedia is community. Community. Community is easier said than done during these times. Let me be honest about that. But it's worth noting, as Jonathan Zecher notes in his piece, that early writers who wrote about acedia, they speculated that acedia was not known to exist in urban dwellings or monastic communities, which is to say that they identified community as an antidote to acedia. Now, finding community is hard. I'm not going to sugarcoat that, but it is essential. Decided a couple days ago to give a call to John Burens, the former president of the Unitarian Universalist Association. John's been a treasured mentor to me throughout my entire time in the ministry, and I wanted to check in with him. One of the things that John said to me during our phone conversation was this. "Remember," he said, "Rabbi Jesus never said, 'Blessed are those who grieve,' in the Sermon on the Mount. He said, 'Blessed are those who mourn.' Grieving is what we do inside, but mourning is what we do in public, in community, with other people." So maybe the antidote is to take these feelings inside and to be willing to share them in the presence of others, in community. During the early days of the pandemic, I got this. It is a cheap plastic lawn chair, plastic and metal lawn chair. I put it in the back of my car, and I said, "Being physically distanced need not mean being alone." And I wrote in those pastoral messages, "If you want, I'll come over and sit in your driveway. We can visit." Being a community is about being willing to be here for each other. It's about having each other to call on so that we need not grieve alone, but that we might mourn together. So those are three of the possible ways to exorcise the noonday demon of listlessness and worry. Tears, the ability to be vulnerable because this is hard. Presence, the ability to be fully present in the present moment. And community, because we need one another. Amidst the reds and the greens, the silvers and golds, the pink and the purple, there is also the blue. There is certainly the blue. And the blue is real. It is so real. Let it also be a part of this season's palette. But remember, it is also not the only color. It is not the full story. And it is certainly not the end of the story. I want to end this morning with a second piece of show and tell. As I was thinking about acedia, I kept having this thought, where else had I heard that? And then I remembered where. Growing up in the Unitarian Universalist church in which I grew up, my childhood church, they published a collection of my minister's sermons on the 10th anniversary, on his 10th anniversary with the church. He would go on to serve that church for another 28 years, a 38-year ministry. And one of the sermons they included in that collection was called "The Devil of the Noonday Sun," which he preached in January 1983, when I was only 5 years old. Both my sermon and my childhood minister, Ken Sawyer's sermon, share a title and a focus on acedia, but they are different in just about every other way. But I thought I might choose to end this morning with the same way that he ended. He concludes as I conclude. For the rest of us, burdened with neither endemic laziness nor chronic hyperactivity, but just this season, just a tiredness that creeps. For the rest of us, know that the world is still tantalizing, as it was before and will be again. Wait it out. Keep breathing. Be faithful in small ways. The juices will flow again. Hang in there and try to stay open to the newness as it awakens in you afresh. A new book, new interests, new loves, new caring. And yet again, the demon's demise. New energy, new joy. Amen. Blessed be. So may it be.
Resilient, I trust the movement, I negate the chaos, uplift the negative, I'll show up at the table, again and again and again, I'll close my mouth and learn to listen. Whoa, 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 whoa. These times are poignant, the winds have shifted. It's all we can do to stay uplifted. Pipelines through backyards, wolves howling out front. Yeah, I got my crew, but truth is what I want. Realigned and on point, power to the peaceful. Prayers to the waters, women at the center, all vessels open to give and receive. Let's see the system brought down to its knees. Whoa, 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 ooh, 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 whoa, 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 speck of dust, and this world is made for me. So let's go and try our luck. See, I've got my roots down, 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 down deep. I've got my roots down, 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 down deep. I've got my roots down. Doing here, what has been done? What are you gonna do about it when the world comes undone? My voice feels tiny, and I'm sure so does yours. Put us all together, make a mighty roar. uplift the negative. I'll show up at the table again and again and again. I'll close my mouth and learn to listen.
Each week in our service, we hold a time for sharing the joys and the sorrows that we bring with us into this church community. This morning, there are several stones to place. The first stone is placed for Amy Glazier. Amy is sad and heartbroken to share that her dear cat Venus, who went missing last weekend, is still missing. We hold Amy and Venus in our hearts. Kathy Putnam asked me to place a stone to hold her friend Carolyn Eikenberry and her family in our prayers. Carolyn's husband, Lynn Eikenberry, had recurring heart problems and recently died. He was a psychiatrist and friend and helped many people navigate challenges and move towards healing and wholeness. So we hold this morning Carolyn Eikenberry and her family in our prayers. Susan Spalt asked me to drop a stone for Donna K. Smith and Donna's husband, Tim, who is battling stomach cancer. Many in our congregation know Donna as the other and main author of Finding Hope, the anthology of writings about mental illness that she and Susan published recently. It is a particularly difficult time to be struggling with such a diagnosis. And so we hold Donna Kay and Tim in our thoughts. Jean McKinney asked me to place a stone. Jean's uncle, Gene Powell, from Inman, South Carolina, died this past Saturday from COVID-related pneumonia. He was 78 years old and was married to Jean's Aunt Anne for 59 years. To quote his obituary, his greatest joy in life was his 3 grandchildren, and he loved a little dog named Sophie. Let us hold Jean's Aunt Anne and the whole McKinney family in our prayers. We place a stone for Sarah Clark Farnell, a stone of joy. It was announced that the newest addition to their family, Jillian B. Ruth, was born on November 19th, 7 pounds, 3 ounces. After an exciting delivery, she is doing great, and so is Sarah. And we hold the whole Clark Farnell family in our hearts during this joyous time. I want to place a stone for a personal sorrow, a personal concern, which is that my father, Thomas Belote, who lives in Massachusetts, is really not doing well health-wise. He faces pretty significant health challenges. And I would ask for the community's prayers for me, for my father, and for our whole family back in Boston. And a final stone is placed for all the joys and sorrows we hold in our hearts that were not spoken and are no less real. Won't you join with me in these words of prayer written by Bruce Southworth? O creative spirit of life, we give thanks for the wonders that are, the quest for meaning, the poetry and myth of human imagination, bright stars in the night, and the joyful sound of voices uplifted in song. We give thanks for good company in houses of fellowship. We would be mindful this morning of the pain within the world, the loneliness, the hunger, the poverty which remains. We join in the faith that in the midst of all that which besets us, we are called to be faithful to life and faithful to one another. The spirit of this season is a spirit of hope and faith in the possibilities which remain open to us. So may we nurture this hope and this faith and proclaim it in our living. Amen.
Let Christmas come, its story told. When days are short and nights are cold, let Christmas come, its lovely song. When evening soon and night is long, let Christmas come, its grace our glow on quiet city house of snow. Let Christmas come, its day will be born again, the truth of dream.
Please join with me in the words by which we extinguish the chalice. We extinguish this flame, but not the light of truth, the warmth of community, or the fire of commitment. These we carry in our hearts until we are together again. Now please join in singing Shalom.